Hey, before we get into this, just wanted to show you the final results for this airport bench that we're going to be creating. I think it's important to show you where we're going before you get started, just so you can decide if this tutorial is worth it for you to watch. Really going to get some high detailed textures. Of course, everything will be modeled and textured in Blender. The texturing is going to use some image-based texturing as well as some procedural methods. So hopefully you find it worthwhile. Let's just go ahead and jump to where I start. All right, welcome to the full tutorial. Those that are coming from the short, I hope you understand there's only so much I could teach you in a 60-second vertical video, but I do try my best. Just adding a plane here. This is going to act as the starting point for our chair. I'm going to jump into edit mode and add some loop cuts here. This is just to give the simple deform modifier something to work off of. So we're going to go to modifiers and search for simple deform. This is going to be a bend, but you'll notice if I check the X, Y, and Z axis, nothing is really doing it for us. So I'm going to add an empty, and I'm going to use that as the origin point for this simple deform. Then we can rotate this on X 90 degrees, and we're getting something that's more predictable for what I'm going for here. Now, this is something I fiddle with for just a minute. I'm playing with the limits, the restriction limits, and eventually I realized that I should just rotate the chair 45 degrees. So I'm going to do that in a second. But while I continue playing with this, I just want to make note of those scale reference dudes in the scene. That's something you can pick up on the Patreon. It's just like $3, I think. But anyway, it's a pack of pre-posed guys that are kind of convenient when you're trying to make something like this. So anyway, I've got the limits set up. One is 0.45. And the other one is the opposite of that, so it's 1 minus 0.45, which ends up being 0.55. Yeah, that's kind of the V shape I was going for. So I apply that modifier, and then I'm just rotating this chair 45 degrees. There are a lot of ways I could have done that. I fiddled around with that modifier for a while, but we eventually got there. Don't need that empty anymore, so I'm just deleting that. I'm just moving my chair up to where I can see what's going on. And I am applying a subdivision modifier. Then I added a loop cut, hit Control B to bevel. And then the only reason I'm doing that is I'm just bracing some of these edges that are averaging out a little bit too much for me. I turned on proportional editing there, and I'm just grabbing and rotating that top edge. That's just to get more of a curved shape, something I noticed in my reference, both for the top and the bottom. So we're going to do it for the bottom now. Grabbing on Z, rotating on X, and I'm just kind of eyeballing this. It's not an exact science, but yeah, that's the main shape of the chair, pretty much done. And yeah, we're going to add another modifier, this time the solidify modifier, just applying scale and rotation in object mode. And let's drag that solidify above the subdivision surface, just so it's a little smoother. And I'm just eyeballing kind of the thickness that I want here. Yeah, that's a good starting point. Let's apply the solidify modifier, and I'm just selecting these faces. This is where I want some cushion. So I've hit I for inset. Let's turn off proportional editing, and then I'm hitting Alt S to scale along normals. And yeah, that's a pretty good shape. However, let's try doing another inset. Let's select these edge loops here. You could also just expand your selection. And I'm going to hit I to inset just to brace that a little bit more. And speaking of bracing, we are going to need some bracing edge loops. So I'm just hitting Control R for edge loops and adding those in there. And just having a look at that already looks pretty good. Don't forget these inner ones as well. Get those with more loop cuts. And yeah, that's like a pretty good general shape. One thing I will try is I'm just going to grab these face loops, and I've hit Alt E, extrude along normals, and I'm going to make sure to pop up this and turn on offset even, just so it's an even offset in there. And that just gives it a little bit more of a pronounced cushion look on top of this metal chair piece. Now, I'm adding a cube, which is kind of the basis. Let's go to my left view. For the bar that will go across all the benches that this kind of sits on. So yeah, nothing special here, just adding and scaling a cube. Doesn't get more simple than this. I did play around with adding a sub-D modifier, but decided, you know what, we don't need sub-D on everything right now. I'm just going to bevel it instead, and we'll just shade it smooth. Now, experimenting with something here and decided it's not the best route to go with, but you're watching a tutorial, so it's not fair for me to cut out the mistakes that I make. So I'm going to show you this approach first and eventually show you what I decided was the better approach. So my thought here was I could add a circle and I could kind of duplicate that circle. Instead of extruding it, I was just going to duplicate kind of the key points where it changes direction. So I'm kind of rotating each duplicated circle, and I'm trying to make this armrest shape. Now, the thought process behind this was, well, I could bridge the edge loops and kind of get a smooth interpolation between each of these. So I try to do that here. I hit Control E for the edges menu, bridge edge loops, and then you can increase the number of cuts. And it was a good thought. This works in some cases. Control E, bridge edge loops, increase the number of cuts. You can change the shape and stuff too. But I think when I do this next one is when I decide, you know what, this isn't so smooth. Even with the extra loop cuts, the shape of this is kind of wonky and lumpy. So yeah, I decided, let's try something else. So the second approach is to add a curve. But then I thought, you know what, we could just use the geometry we already had. We could start with points. So now I'm just going through and selecting the points that we can start with. So some of the original points from the original circles I added. This is very roundabout, but hopefully it gives you an idea for kind of a few different approaches you could take here. So I selected the inverse with Control I, deleted everything except for these points. Then I'm just joining these with F. F stands for fill. And I'm going to subdivide or add a little loop cut on one of these just with Control R, just so we get a little bit of a smoother shape. And now with that geometry, you can right click, go to Convert to Curve. So just like that, we've changed it to a curve, because the nice thing is we get these cool bevel depth and geometry extrusion options, which is really cool. Just going to right click and shade smooth. And I'm playing with a few things here. I want it to be a wider shape. The extrude wasn't really doing what I was expecting there. I mean, this could work, but it's not really what I'm going for. Just continuing to play with the key attributes there. I'm going to turn down the resolution just because I'm going to end up subdividing this anyway. And then I just scaled on X, and that actually worked great. That was exactly what I was looking for. So now it's just a matter of continuing to scale, playing around with the depth, playing around with the extrusion amount. And once I'm happy, now remember this is a curve, once I'm happy we can right click and convert that back to a mesh, which is what I'll do just in a second. I'm just tweaking these values, trying to make sure I'm happy with what we have. Because as soon as we convert, we're just going to right click, convert to mesh. There's no real going back, so we got to be happy with this shape, which I am. We're going to extrude this bottom bit here, try to rotate it, and let's scale on Z0, so SZ0. That's just going to make sure that one is totally flat, so we can continue the shape of this in just a moment. Let's close this one off. We're going to extrude, scale in, and then let's hit Control F and go to Grid Fill. It's kind of a nice little tool where you can change the number of span and your offset just to fill in with a grid. That's what Grid Fill does. Keeps it with some nice quads. Now I'm selecting this area just with Control Shift left click to select everything in between, and we're going to inset that with I and then extrude along normals to scale that basically along its normals, and I'm scaling in on X, just trying to get this little pad, which in my reference is kind of like a leather pad, just a bit of arm cushion there. What you see me doing there is Alt-S to scale along normals, and then S and X to scale along the X-axis. Now I'm taking these edge loops, or these edges, and just bringing them in so they're not making this weird shape where they're overlapping themselves. So just bringing them in along the y-axis. And yeah, I decided that was looking good enough for what we want there, and then it was just a matter of extruding this down. And this is where I'm going to bring off some other leg details, but for now let's just fill that bottom portion there. We don't really need to think too much about what we're doing there. Just grid fill. Again, that's Control F. Now I started adding loop cuts, and I can scroll up and down, but I want to localize where I'm adding loop cuts. So I added some bracing loops, and now I'm adding some loop cuts in there. I ended up with 4. I'm going to face selection mode and selecting Control Shift to select everything in between, deleting those faces. Now I can select those edge loops, just hitting extrude, and then we're scaling along Y to bring those out a bit. We can also scale along individual origins to bring those in on themselves. Then under Loop Tools, which is the right-click menu, Loop Tools is an add-on that comes with Blender. You can just go to the extensions section and get that for free. There's this cool 2-circle option, which is what I did there. Then I'm continuing to scale things and going to get ready for some extrusions. So hitting E, scaling along the y-axis, and yeah, that's how out of one shape we kind of created these additional circles that extrude out of it. Go back and watch that section again if you're a little bit unclear about what happened. But yeah, I'm just continuing to shape this, make some decisions. I'm going to hit Control D, duplicate this, and do the same on the other side. Now this is where we're actually going to use the bridge edge loops. Once again, this is a better use case for that. We tried to do it earlier. Hit Control E, bridge edge loops, and again we can increase the number of cuts. If you have an odd number, you have 1 in the middle there. So I went for 3, and we'll do the same. Control E, bridge edge loops. We'll go for 3 cuts, and yeah, that's just a really nice smooth transition. Now these are a little bit thick, so I end up thinning these out eventually, but for now let's just Control B and bevel this to get some bracing there. I think I toy around with potentially bracing this other section too, but I decided it's not worth the extra geometry. Let's just Control Z. And yeah, from here I can start to, let's make sure we're scaling on individual origins. We're going to extrude and scale in, bring it down, extrude, scale in, and this is where I'm creating the little feet for this section. So it's just extruding along particular axis, scaling in, scaling out, really basic stuff here. We're going to bring in those feet, and instead of doing a grid fill, no one will ever see the bottom of this. That'll never see the light of day, so I just did a fill. No need to keep it pretty down there. And yeah, still kind of looking at this and deciding, you know what, that's way too thick. I decided here, let's just bring the bar, that middle bar, out from itself. So I just extruded those faces, and we could add some bracing edge loops there. But now I believe I'm going to tackle the thickness of these legs. So I'm just selecting these faces and then everything I need to select. Now I could just hit Alt-S to scale along normals, but that may cause some issues with the feet here. So let's just delete this connector here, the connecting edge loop there, and that is just making it easier for me to work with the rest of this leg without having the feet selected. I could just hit L for select linked, and then come down here and hit deselect. That's kind of a nice trick. Now I could hit Alt-S and scale, except let's go to object mode, apply scale and rotation. Sometimes you'll get unpredictable results when your transforms haven't been applied. And yeah, that looks good. However, I'm just going to scale in some other areas so it transitions nicely. And the bottom there ended up being a little messy, so I'm just going to delete everything. And let's start from here. So yeah, a little bit of back and forth here. Definitely not the most efficient workflow, but it's important to know that not everything is just one go all the way through. Sometimes you make mistakes, you change your mind, and you have to know how to back up as well as go forward in your work. Not just with Control Z, you should know how to delete stuff and how to keep things clean and know when to start over, when to cut your losses and just delete stuff and try again. So yeah, now we have those feet. We're just going to fill the bottom again. And yeah, I'm going to zoom out, take a look here in just a second. I'm just going to brace these with Control B for bevel real quick. Change the profile to a sharper 1 shape. And yeah, that's looking better. Let's just do a mirror modifier, see what that looks like on both sides. We can turn on clipping, bring the middle in on itself to crash in the middle there. And the proportions are a little bit off, so I'm going to work with that definitely in just a moment. That's why we have the scale reference guy there, just so we can get that looking right. So yeah, let's just grab him, try to bring him up into this chair. And I'm noticing some scale issues. He kind of looks like a little kid with his feet dangling and his legs intersecting the front of the chair here. So first thing I'll do is let's just delete this edge loop, dissolve it with Control X, grab that front section in so it doesn't have that much room there. And yeah, that looks pretty good. We can grab this cushion section, bring it back, bring this edge loop back to give it some space, just move those around a little bit. For the chair, that's looking better, but his feet are still dangling. Looks like a little child. So we definitely need to fix the proportions of the frame itself. Let's just make sure that's crashing in on itself, so it's merging at the center. And now I believe, yeah, we're going to scale this down. That's the nice thing about the mirror modifier, is you could scale each side kind of independently and just bring it in on itself in the middle, which is really cool. So yeah, that's why scale reference guys are so useful. Human reference, of course, as humans, we know what our size is in relation to other things usually, so that's kind of a nice thing to have some human reference in your scene. Just going to do the mirror modifier on this chair as well. Make sure we're clipping in the middle. And that just makes it easy for me to make the whole chair skinnier. And yeah, it's looking a lot better. Let's just reorder this so we could apply the mirror modifier. And we actually want to bring that side way over, because in these airport chairs there are actually like 3 or 4 chairs on one bar. So not everyone gets an armrest. Unfortunately, the person in the middle kind of just rubs shoulders, so hopefully you're familiar with who you're sitting next to. I've just used an array modifier on those chairs to duplicate them kind of an equidistant way. And then yeah, just looking at this, I think these chairs would just fall forward. You'd fall on your face. So I'm just bringing the center of gravity back by pulling these support legs forward, and we're just going to add 1 loop cut there. Maybe bring it up ever so slightly on Z. Have a little bit of a bend. And I'm just going to scale that, so S, Y, 0. Scale it on Y0 to flatten that out. And yeah, that's looking a lot more sensible. Looks like a lot more stable, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Now from here, I'm adding some bracing edge loops on the inside of that supporting bar in the middle there. And then I'm going to bevel these. So we have this face on both of those right there. And this can kind of act as a support bar that supports the bottom of the chair. Now this is debatable whether this is necessary or not. On one hand, yeah, it makes sense. You would have to have a bar there to support the chairs. But on the other hand, you know, we're not structural engineers. We're just 3D artists. So we're not building something for functionality. We're building it for the visuals, right? So from a visual perspective, that bottom bar isn't doing much for this chair, right? It's not changing the look of it. It's certainly not really going to be a prominent feature on the chair, but it's something I decided it's worth doing. So yeah, I'm just nothing crazy here. I hit I for inset, then I hit O for outset, and then decided let's just Control Z. I don't need that. We're just going to do Control R to just do some bracing edge loops instead. That just seemed to be a cleaner approach where we just had these cube shapes. So yeah, then I'm going to add 1 more bracing right there. And that is just because we're working within sub D, so sometimes you've got to brace your edge loops to retain some of your original shape. Same thing applies to that front face there. We're just going to brace that. And again, you can kind of make the call. This is a lot of effort for just something that's not really going to be visible. But yeah, I decided I also wanted a bar for the front bottom. So it clips into itself right there, joins together, and then I'm just adding some bracing edge loops yet again. And you'll see what that looks like in object mode. There you go. At this point, I was pretty happy. I decided on the back there, instead of adding another support bar, I just add an edge loop and kind of bring this one up so it touches or just barely touches the back of the chair there. And yeah, I'm just playing around with the rotation and the positioning, and that looks pretty good. I just want it at least to look like those chairs aren't just floating, but they're attached somehow to the frame. And then we're saving for the first time in. A little bit risky to wait this long to save, but yeah, there we go. Now's your reminder to save your work. Just applying the mirror modifiers and joining our objects, and then going setting the origin to the geometry just so it's in the middle there. Then I'm adding a plane, and if you hit Control period, you can change where your origin is. You can move it around. So that's what I'm going to do in just a minute. However, I decided I needed some more bracing edge loops. I'm just playing around with this. Yeah, the shading was just looking a little weird to me back there, so that's why I decided to brace those just with Control R again for edge loops. And yep, if you hit Control period and select an object, you can change the origin point. I'm just going to snap it to the floor. Yeah, it's just kind of nice to have your origin at the bottom center of an object. Bringing in my scale reference guy once again just to make sure he looks good on this chair. Now from here, we could start to do some material assignments. You saw me just toggle that subdivision to see what it looks like without subdivision. But yeah, let's go to some material assignments. We just need two. The first one will be black leather. And the second one will simply be metal. And there you go. Now we just need to assign certain parts of our mesh with the material. So we're going to assign everything with metal. As you can see there, I'm just in material preview mode. Now we're selecting the areas that need to be this black leather. Now, I could have just selected kind of the central face there and then expanded my selection. But I don't have a number pad right now on my keyboard. It's really convenient. I think it's just Control plus or Control Shift plus or something, and you can expand or grow the selection. You can get to it in the menu, but I decided I would just select it manually. So to select everything in between two faces, just hold down Control and Shift. That's how I was getting that middle section. So I'm just holding down Alt-Shift-Click to select multiple edge loops. Then Control-Shift-Click to select everything between those two faces. So yeah, you get plenty of chances for me to see this as it's a bit repetitive. Yeah, you can see how I did that. Now I have all of those. We can assign those the black leather, and let's make that an actual black color, just so it's easy to differentiate visually. And yeah, that looks pretty good. However, we do need these armrests. So just select that loop cut, and then yeah, same thing, Control-Shift-Click to select everything in between the two faces there. However, once I got down there, I decided let's add one more bracing edge loop. So that interrupted my process just a little bit, but we can go back and continue to select. And let's assign those with the black leather. Great. Now, of course, we're not done here. We need to actually do some proper texturing. So let's go to a resource. Now, initially I'll pull up textures.com just because that's a classic. A lot of good textures there, but I actually want to show you a free resource. This is Texture Ninja. So it's just texture.ninja and just tons of CC0 free textures you can go download. Of course, go check out their Patreon. That's a great way to support someone. But yeah, they've got all these great textures. So I just searched for metal and let's grab this one. Now, a lot of these aren't seamless, so I'll show you how to make a texture seamless in just a second. But for now, let's just vertical split, go to the shader editor here. And for our metal texture, let's just drag in that metal texture we just downloaded from Texture Ninja. And let's drop it into the base color just to kind of get things going. Now, this isn't UV unwrapped. We are going to want to UV unwrap this. Now we could spend time doing like a clean unwrap, or we could do the really dirty thing, which is just Smart UV Project. Now, I try to do good UV unwraps where I can, but in this case, I thought, what the heck, I might as well just unwrap this quickly and get on with the texturing. In this case, the unwrap is really just for the bake itself. Now, I went into UV Packmaster and they have a cool Orient UV setting, which is really cool to get all your UVs facing the same direction. Then I'm turning on heuristic search and pixel margin. What heuristic search does is as soon as you click pack, it just keeps searching through different unpack methods to find the most efficient unpacking of your UVs. So, or packing, I should say. So that's what the heuristic search is. Once it finds something you like, you could just hit escape and it finishes. And I'm just having a look here. We do have some harsh seams, which I think we can get rid of by using just generated texture coordinates. Then we could change our material from flat projection to box projection on our actual image texture. Then we could turn up this blend amount. So yeah, you don't need to use your UVs for texturing. Like I said, the UVs are kind of just there for me to bake to at the end. You can also play around with object for your unwrap method for your texture coordinate node. And yeah, I'm just going to scale that up. Now, we don't have seams for the UV islands or for the UVs, but we still have some really obvious seams. And this is from the actual image texture itself. You can see how it kind of goes from light to dark suddenly in those vertical lines. So this is where I'll show you how I like to make seamless textures out of pretty much any image. So I am getting into Adobe Photoshop. I try to avoid Adobe products where I can, just for personal reasons, but Photoshop's one of those that I feel like I have to use, right? Like there is Affinity Photo and I've used that and I've learned that, but some things Photoshop's just still kind of the best at. So for this one, let's just go up to Filter, Other, and then you can go to Offset. So you can offset the image so you can see where kind of these harsh seams are when it starts to tile. Then let's select those seams and just hit delete. Then we can go up to Select, Modify, and Expand. Let's expand that selection so we grab some of the original. And now we're just going to do a generative fill. So this is generating something to fill in the gaps here. I didn't have to type anything in. It's just going to try to do its best to continue the image. And yeah, some of these are pretty bad. Some of them kind of work. That's the thing with AI. You don't really know what you're going to get. It's very hard to control it. So we're just going to export this. Actually, let's go back and let me show you some of the dark areas you can use. It's over here somewhere. You can use the dodge tool, which lightens some dark areas. So that's a way you can continue kind of to tweak your image to make it so you don't have these really harsh dark areas and light areas, but everything's a little bit more seamless. The opposite of the dodge tool is the burn tool. So you could use that. You can also change the exposure so it's not so intense. And you can start to darken some of the light areas as well. So just kind of eyeballing this. It's not perfect. Once it's good enough, I hit Control-Alt-Shift-W just to quickly export that. And I saved it over the top of the original one. And we're good. Sometimes that doesn't update in Blender, even when you go to Solid View and back to Material Preview. So you just have to open the image again. So we're just going to open that up again once it loads. Yeah, there you go. Nice and seamless. We don't see really any harsh visible seams anymore. So yeah, that's just a nice way you can use even a image texture that's not seamless, and you kind of fake it and make it into a seamless texture. See, I'm just using that same image to go into the roughness, changing the map range, using the map range node to kind of clamp down the light areas and change the values. Map range is probably my most used node. Color ramp is what I used to use a whole lot, but map range is pretty powerful as well. So yeah, we're just using that base color into the metallic channel with the map range, and then I'm map ranging the original base color as well. So with texturing, you're going to see me just going back and forth on a lot of things, just kind of playing around with different values. Texturing, a lot more than modeling, for me is about experimentation. I do a lot of back and forth just to try to kind of get the look I'm going for. I'm soloing a node by just hitting Control Shift and clicking on the node. You need an add-on called Node Wrangler. I'm not sure if that comes, that might come activated in Blender these days. I don't know if you need to activate it anymore. I'll have to double check on that. Yeah, I can just change the mapping though of that image texture, and let's grab a leather texture to get that one going. This one I am using textures.com just because some of these come with a normal map, which is really handy for what we're going to do. So yeah, let's just download the normal map and maybe roughness as well, just to have something. And if you hit Control Shift T, then you can set up a whole texture at once just by selecting a few maps. In this case, we just have the normal and the roughness. So yeah, you could change this to last modified date to find whatever files you downloaded most recently. And let's just increase the tiling to something like 8 for now, maybe more, 13, yeah. Now, if you just call this a day and call that the leather that we're going for, that isn't quite the effect we want. We want to have some proceduralism. So I'm using Fluent Materializer. That's that menu I just brought up to get this edge map. Really, really handy. I use Fluent Materializer all over the place. Just has some nice procedural tools that make it easy for texturing in accordance with things like edge and cavity. So I'm just driving that through a factor on a mix color node, and I'm just going to mix between black and white so I really can see what's going on. So this first one, let's have it be black, and the other one will be white. Let's plug the roughness back into where it belongs, down there. And yeah, now you can see kind of what this edge mask procedural edge map tool is doing. You can change the distance. There's all sorts of parameters we're going to play with as we go through here, but this first one, I'm just going to have the edges kind of be a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to duplicate that mix node, and let's duplicate this edge map node and use the mask again for the factor on this second one. And then let's use the roughness for the leather texture to drive the texture of the edge mask. And this is where I really, really get the effect I'm going for. We're going to have to use a map range node to kind of fine tune the input on that texture here. But yeah, just playing around with the scale of kind of the breakup here and the distance of the edge map to try to figure out why I'm not getting the effect I want. Ultimately though, you'll see I just need to clamp some of the values in that roughness texture. So we will do that now. Let's just add a map range, drop it in here. We can solo this one, and you can see why this wasn't really working. The roughness doesn't really have a lot of contrast. It's all kind of a white image. So I'm just clamping down the minimum and the maximum to have more contrast basically. And now as we extend the distance on this edge map, you could see it's really, really picking up within the crevices, which is kind of like a cool cracked leather look. Now, you see that warping there? Just go to your subdivision modifier and use UV Smooth All. It's a quick way to fix that. That's a really common issue that I see in people's subdivided mesh. Yeah, now I'm just playing with the colors, making that cracked material a little bit lighter. And it's nice. You'll notice that's just appearing at the edges of our image. It's all originating from one roughness map, which is really, really cool. Of course, we can use this to drive more than just the color, but for now, let's increase the tiling so the texture is a little bit smaller, more frequent. And let's drop a mix color in for the roughness. Don't forget about your roughness. Don't spend all your time on base color. We have other channels to play around with. So for this one, I'm just going to use, again, Fluent Materializer is a great add-on. I suggest you go get it. They have some cool procedural grunges and stuff that you could use as a factor. This is just some additional kind of breakup in my roughness. I felt it was too uniform. So yeah, I'm just playing around with the mix factor here, the scale of this procedural grunge texture. And the range of values that it's coming up with here. Yeah, pretty happy with that leather. Let's go back to the metal. Let's give the metal a little bit more love. What if we have kind of this grunge at the base of the metal texture? So let's start with, let's see here. Let's do a mixed color. You'll notice I do that quite a bit. It's kind of a way to layer more textures on top of each other, is just by using this mixed color node. Then I'm going to grab a grunge gradient. So this one is an actual gradient, so we can change the texture at the base of this object. So I'm just going to change this second input, slot B on the mix color, to black so we could really see what's going on. Then we can raise the distance, the Z distance of this grunge gradient. So you can see that's just a really cool way to add some different texture to the base of an object with a really nice grungy fall off. And yeah, I'm actually going to use the original for input B as well, but for the second input, let's drop down a hue saturation value node, and then we can drop down the value. So that's just a quick way to make that bottom texture, or the second texture input, a little bit darker than the original. And again, give some love to your roughness and your normal as well. Don't spend all your time on base color. There are other attributes of your texture. We can use that same gradient grunge for the factor in this roughness mix color. And once this loads, you can see that this is going to be a lot rougher at the base. Now, instead of having this be uniformly more rough, let's do the same thing where we drop down hue saturation value node, and we just change the value of that bottom, or input B. And actually, let's do a map range node. That's a different way we could break this up. Now, I'm pausing here occasionally just to let the texture load because we're in material preview mode. Sometimes it's not an instant update when you add more nodes. But yeah, I'm just clamping down the lights here, bringing up the blacks just so we have more contrast. That's basically what I'm doing there. And yeah, just deciding, yeah, there's definitely more contrast, but now it's a little bit splotchy, which I'm not a fan of. It doesn't look realistic to me. So just continuing to play with the minimum and maximum values on my map range, which is what makes this such a powerful node. Yeah, that's it's looking better, closer to what I'm going for here. However, I want to increase the tiling of the metal texture overall, and I'm just going to scale this back just a little bit so it's not as contrasty. Yeah, I went back and forth on that one a lot, but like I said, with texturing, sometimes I do go back and forth quite a bit just as I'm testing different things. But yeah, eventually we'll arrive where we want to go, continuing to play with the value and the roughness. And I'm going to add a map range just for the overall grunge gradient effect. So instead of going from 0 to 1, which is pretty, well, it's the full range, we're going to go from 0 to 0.5. So now in the most intense areas, it's only going to be 0.6. So almost half of what it was, basically just minimizing the effect overall. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll jump to some final results here just so you can see what everything looks like in the end. Thanks for coming along for the journey. I hope you learned something here. This is obviously slower. I don't think it's that people's attention spans are shorter. I think it's just way more competitive, right? You have a lot of people offering really great information in short format. So just like a 60-second short vertical video, you just see it on the go on your phone. And yeah, I try to condense as much as I can, but every now and then I think it's just beneficial to sit down and just show something full process, including the mistakes, including my thought process. You don't just learn the best way to do something, which is important, but you learn, there's a process behind what we do. And even with a very simple prop like this that only took me maybe closer to 45, even with a simple prop, there's still a bit of a process. There's still, some things you have to work through. So I want to show you that as well, just to give you an honest look at what this looks like day to day. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for checking this out. Thanks for supporting me on patreon.com/RileyB3D. I appreciate you. You make this all possible. Thanks.